Welcome to the podcast. It's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist. The Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. Today we are talking all about nutrition because we have Alex Larson from Alex Larson Nutrition back with us. Alex, you had a baby.
I did.
My goodness, and you're already back with
Well,
us.
it's been a couple months, but I still need to feel like a normal human being outside of, being with this infant for 22, 23 hours a day. So
This makes you feel totally normal, right?
I know. I
Talking
feel
to
like I feel
a
like
bunch of nerds on cubes on screen.
yes. I'll take what I can get.
Has it? Every kid's different. This is your third one, Alex.
Yeah, so I have two boys. They're my
any
older, and
novel
now I have a
learnings to
girl.
share
I
with
had a girl
athletes?
in September, so that is really exciting. So a lot more floral print clothes on this baby. And I swear, like, little baby girls make much cuter noises than our boys did. That was the thing we noticed, like, right away. Like, oh, this is way cuter noises. So she's great, though.
When's your next baby?
Never. We're done. This is
That's what
it.
people say about Ironmans too, until they forget about the last Ironman.
No,
How hard it was in their life.
I'm officially done.
Yeah, impressive to anybody that decides to have more kids than adults in the house.
Yeah,
That's,
we're playing
that's crazy.
zone,
You're
and
outnumbered.
this is enough.
Yeah.
You're outnumbered.
So, any new insights from recovering from pregnancy so far that you'd like to share with endurance athletes, like from that perspective?
Yeah.
Is there
Well, it's a
anything that-
little different now for me because, like, this is my third and final. So I very much am going in with this mindset of, like, I'm going to take care of myself. That's going to be a really big priority. And so something that was really interesting was back in July, I had my ferritin checked, my iron stores, and they were super low. And right before I delivered, like 2 weeks before I delivered, they did some iron infusions for me because they were so low. They were worried about, like, recovery, and I was going to be super tired already, like trying to, heal and take care of a newborn and then having really low iron levels. They were concerned. So, amazingly, at my 6-week appointment, I had them recheck my ferritin levels. So they went from 7 to 224, which was wild. And that's actually a little on the higher side. So I don't need to take an iron supplement for a while now. But I definitely noticed a huge difference in just how less tired I had been, like, in previous postpartum periods. So yeah, that was kind of an interesting nutritional insight from that perspective. But yeah, like, the whole breastfeeding thing is always way harder than anyone ever would expect. But there is no appetite like breastfeeding appetite. Like, I just eat all the time because I'm constantly hungry and thirsty, and that's been kind of fun. It's like Ironman diet all over again.
What does low iron, what could that do to somebody? And is that more common in men or women?
It's more common in women, just like with menstrual cycles typically. Not to say that men wouldn't have a low iron, but usually more common in female athletes. But with low ferritin levels, you'll just notice that your fatigue a lot easier is the big one for sure. You notice definitely some performance improvements if your ferritin is, at a optimal level. I mean, for me, I like to see our athletes at like a 50 or above. Sometimes you'll see a little bit of hair loss with low iron, like deficiencies. There's lots of different things, but the fatigue is the big one in terms of performance.
And that's because there's less red blood cells, right?
Yes,
But you
exactly.
need iron to create that.
Yep.
And so for men out there too, if you decide, well, I'm just going to supplement with iron a bunch. If you supplement too much, you can cause cancer and other issues. So it's not one of those ones that you can just bang like vitamin C.
Yeah, well, with
Zero
any
consequence.
nutrient, if you're taking in too much, there's side effects. If you take massive amounts of vitamin C, you can easily get the diarrhea. So it's like, yeah, when you get sick, my mom's always like, "Oh, pump in the vitamin C," and I'm like, "No, I'm gonna take reasonable amounts, thanks." Like, so
I like
yeah,
calling it the diarrhea. Like,
well, yeah, because it is.
the black lung.
I talked to same thing basically. I pro athlete that I knew, female pro athlete, went in for a blood test expecting low iron. They weren't adapting to their training. They were feeling super fatigued. They were doing everything else, and their iron was up darn near 300 if I remember correctly.
wow.
So quite high, and that was like a shock to that athlete to try to figure that out. So this is like I hear iron commonly assumed as like, I'm fatigued and I'm an endurance
yeah.
athlete, and particularly on the women's side. And it's like a common narrative that I've heard. But it is absolutely worth doing what Alex did, getting it checked.
Yeah.
And just like what Nate was talking about, it's worth, and you can get your iron levels checked with like I know that some blood tests can be really expensive, but a very basic blood test should give you your ferritin levels and that
Well,
sort of
I
stuff. Is
think
that right, Alex?
the standard one will do like your red blood cell, your hemoglobin, and all that. But I think you do have to request specifically ferritin. I don't think that's standard in there. You do have to ask for it. So, yeah, when I had asked for it in July, I said, oh, I'm just curious what it is, but really I was suspicious just because I had been like extremely tired. And then when it came back 7, I was a little embarrassed. I was like, oh my gosh, that is really low.
In the US,
How are
too,
you
there
coping
online,
with?
sorry. In the US,
Oh,
there are
sorry,
online
go ahead.
kits that you can buy too to test it at home
Yeah.
and send it in
Yeah.
if you don't want to go to the doctor.
How are you coping with the lack of sleep? I assume there's a lack of sleep unless it's like a dream baby. I don't-
She's a pretty good baby.
They're all dream babies.
Yeah, she's a pretty good baby. Usually we're up
Sorry to my
sometime between
children.
like 1 and 2 a.m. And then again sometime between like 4 and 5. But every once in a while she'll give me like a nice like 5-6 hour stretch, which is like, whew, like, you know,
Awesome.
little energy shot there. But it's interesting now with 3 kids because there's been a couple nights, like last night, for example, I was up feeding her and then she was like wide awake, like super happy, like giggly. I'm like, this is so cute, but not at 3 a.m. And then my 3-year-old like walks out of his room and he's like, morning, mom, is it time to get up? And I was like, no, go back to bed. So I was like, what is going on? It was just a weird night last night. So I did have a little caffeine today to get me through.
Are you doing any sort of like are you back to any sort of like consistent like endurance training or anything else right now? What's your plan with that, and how are you going to go about doing
Yeah, so I did sign up for Grandma's Half Marathon in June next year. That's in my hometown here. And yeah, I do really love that race. It's fantastic. So right now I'm just doing some strength training when I can fit in. Usually when the baby's like wide awake and just kind of hanging out, I will do some sort of like calisthenics and planking and pelvic floor, like strengthening and that type of stuff. Just during the day for like 15-20 minutes. And probably in a month or so here, I'll start doing some like cycling on the bike just to get some movement. It's going to be winter. It's going to be hard to get out and do some running, just to figure out timing with kids and my husband's schedule. So I'm thinking probably February, March, I'll start running again.
Sounds like you're not rushing it and you're willing to be flexible with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I had a pelvic
Right.
floor therapist tell me she likes to see her athletes wait like 5-6 months before they really start running on a regular basis, just because it takes a lot longer than people think to really heal everything up.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Awesome. Well, Alex, thanks for being on
Yeah.
here. I'm going to run right into Rowan's question. It says, all the nutrition advice I keep hearing is about getting in tons of carbs, often in gel forms, both during and after rides. I'm curious because all that amounts to so much sugar consumption. All the other nutrition advice I hear that is not focused on endurance performance states that we should minimize sugar in our diet. So I'm curious if eating all of the sugar might be good for performance, but bad for long-term health. Since I'm not going to be making any money from cycling, quite the opposite actually, I want to make sure, and that's his words, not mine, Rowan. I want to make sure that's not on the side that I'm judging or something. I want to make sure that I'm not being short-sighted in how I approach my nutrition. Any guidance on how to balance nutrition for performance and what is best for long-term health? There are other considerations here. Love the podcast and app. Keep up what you're doing. And I just wanted to share this one. We've covered this sort of topic before. We'll do this one real fast, but we got a lot of discussion about this going on just based off of the recent YouTube video we just published, all about like a science-based nutrition plan that you can follow for cyclists and trying to optimize your intake. Super popular video. You obviously, if you listen to the podcast, heard about it on the previous week, but check it out if you haven't. It's on our YouTube channel, TrainerRoad, or youtube.com/TrainerRoad. But Alex, I'm sure you get this from your clients. So what's like the short answer that you give them when they're concerned about taking in so much sugar?
Yeah, I think it's really common, especially with society's diet culture, to really fear sugar. But for active adults, we are very much needing that sugar for a purpose, and our body is going to use it very efficiently to fuel our workouts. Yes, for non-athletes, they do tend to overconsume sugar, and they don't need all that sugar. But when we're restricting, sugar or fuel during workouts, that ultimately your body's going to start looking elsewhere for energy because it's going to need something. So it might use some energy from fat stores, or it will, I guess, but it will also use quite a bit of muscle breakdown as well, which I think you highlight in that video. And so really just keep in mind that no matter what level athlete you are, you're still worthy of fueling. You're just going to need to align and match your carb sugar consumption with your volume and intensity of activity.
Ivy, anything stand out to you in this one before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I mean, the statement that just stood out to me was that they were like, yeah, I'm not going to be making any money from cycling. The opposite. So, I don't want to be short-sighted in how I approach my nutrition. I feel like it's pretty normal for cyclists to spend a lot of money on equipment upgrades and, your bike and wheels and stuff and miss this last few percentage of something more to spend money on. Like, I get it. It's really can be really expensive to fuel your workouts, but I feel like that last few percentage can be so much more impactful than something like an equipment upgrade that make you feel a little bit faster on the bike. All these things like that you can spend a lot of money on make you feel a little bit faster, but to fuel appropriately for me makes me feel so much better than if I wouldn't, So I know it seems like more things to spend money on, but in my opinion, it's one of the most valuable things that you can spend money on as a cyclist. Nutrition, and then of course, like appropriate training. TrainerRoad is super affordable, and like these are things that will make a much more significant impact for you when you're deciding on what to spend your money on with cycling than the Aero wheel set or super cool Aero socks. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so much.
How expensive were those socks again? Like $1,200 that we found
Crazy.
on that? It's insane.
Yeah.
$1,200 for Aero socks. It's
I
amazing.
think though, on Ivy, this question, they're more concerned about long-term health than getting faster. And Alex, what you said is, well, pair your carb intake to your workouts.
Mhm.
That's the rub. Like, how do you do that? And that's the part where people get confused and they say, well, I'm not working out for like 2 days, so I don't eat any carbs at all because I have time to recover.
Yeah, you still definitely need carbs on your rest days. You just don't need maybe quite as much because you're not fueling those workouts necessarily. If you're having some carbs before a workout, during, if it's long enough, and then after, you might not need those on a rest day, but you still need to make sure you're getting carbs because it's all about reloading those glycogen levels. It surprisingly can take a long time. It can take days to really fully reload those glycogen levels after, a really challenging training block. So it takes some practice, I think, to match and align those carb intakes with your exercise. And that's something that we work with our athletes a lot on, is just giving them kind of like a structured plan so that they feel really confident and comfortable with their food choices and fueling. And they don't have to worry about, am I over consuming or under consuming? They feel like they're in the ballpark of where they need to be.
I think the top two things that people are concerned about are one, type 2 diabetes, developing insulin resistance. And that's what you like if you read diet culture, it's kind of the,
Mm-hmm.
and you can. And the other is body composition of like carbs will make me fat. And I'm this athlete who wants to be really fast. Being overweight with extra fat on your body can lead to heart conditions like being obese, there's cancer, heart risk, lots of things. But the exercise is like the cure-all for all of those things, right? I'm sure there is some kind of study on here, but if it led to type 2 diabetes, I think we would see all the pro athletes who just slam carbs all day long get type 2 diabetes. And it's the opposite. Like exercise reduces the chance while you're doing this. Also with body composition too. The people who eat the most sugar, I think like Keegan, are thinnest, which is really crazy because it allows them to train the most and get the most other workouts to recover and be consistent and all of that. So
Yeah.
that's the tough part.
Yeah, that video you
Inflammation too, another one.
referenced, Jonathan, that video really kind of explains it well in terms of like that low energy availability and what it does to your body. You see muscle loss, you see hormones get deregulated. And, when you see those hormone levels be negatively affected, like cortisol, for example, that's very well associated with increased belly fat. And so if you can consistently fuel well over time, we tend to see really good results with body composition. And you don't see that gradual weight gain that can often happen from athletes that are kind of in that restrict binge kind of cycle that we see a lot of times.
This is why I think the safest bet is to, during your workouts, like Alex said, like that's when you need to pack it in and fuel the work. It's just like, your car and everything else. Or this probably doesn't make, if you have an electric car, like you don't just like keep the battery full at all times and you're not using it. Like you charge it up when you need to use it. And that's like when you want to, get it going. And I think everyone always forgets this. And I'm just going to run through some kilojoules really quick. So let's just say that you rode for 1 hour, and for that 1 hour, you rode at 150 watts. That's 540 kilojoules that you burned. if you were to look at that just in terms of carbohydrates, that's 126 grams of carbs. So there's this tip. Sorry, go ahead, Nate.
You wouldn't burn all carbs on that, but yeah, there's a
Certainly.
mix between fat and carb.
But if you're looking to try to fuel the amount of work that you're doing, and just make sure that you aren't, after that workout, in some sort of a hole that you need to worry about cortisol spiking, that you need to worry about other hormonal imbalances and everything else. This is why you should fuel the work. Even when it's easy, you can fuel the work. Do you have to do it at 160 grams of carbohydrate like Matteo Jorgensen? Probably not, right? Not to mention that would probably cause the diarrhea, as we talked about earlier. But find your balance and just, Alex Wilde said this at one point, and he said, like, when my pedals start turning, I start taking in my carbs. And I think that that's a really good mindset to get into, is just like, well, whenever I'm riding, I'm making sure that I'm taking something in and I'm doing it regularly. Because the trickiest part is that you end up depleted, starving. You absolutely destroy your fridge. You have a steak meal, like Ivy says, where you're just like, everything that you can get, you just fit it in. And then after that, you're like, well, no carbs for 2 months, because like you're punishing yourself for it. And it's this cycle that can become super unhealthy with food. And that's why Alex is saying, like, fuel the work and focus on fueling the work, because then that allows you the flexibility to be able to, like Nate said, you're taking a couple of days off. It allows you the flexibility to really fit in all that variety that you need in your diet, and then just pack the carbs in during and surrounding.
Yeah, Rowan, if you're concerned about your health and you want to optimize for health, but still train, I would, while you're training, do carbs, or, have the sports gels and a sports drink. And then all the other time, you don't have to have a drop of sugar. Like, you can go all whole based carbohydrates, beans, whole grains, vegetables, fruit. Do all of that. I think too, fruit, any sugar that's wrapped in fiber, like fruit, or vegetables, and whole grains too, those are A-okay and don't lead to those. I'm guessing you're probably worried about insulin spikes, which aren't necessarily bad, but if you're worried about that, you're not going to go bad with that kind of diet. And then on the bike, have your gels and your sports drink. Done, just stop that. That's probably a good balance, or a good way into this, to be able to still get faster and increase body composition, improve insulin sensitivity, and general overall health.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And pairing it with protein too can help prevent that like really big sugar spike, helps stabilize blood sugars. Yeah, I think that's a great approach to taking that as well. But if you do find in the afternoon, evenings, you're really craving sugar, it's a classic sign that you haven't eaten enough earlier on in the day. So just make sure that you're getting good, solid meals in, you're snacking when you need to, so that you're not having that kind of craving, overly hungry situation.
If you're worried about those spikes too, and regular meals, as Alex said, protein or protein and fat earlier at the beginning of the meal will actually reduce insulin spikes later on. Eating something on an empty stomach, it just shoots up. I think the worst is like Skittles, I think, for like of like food that they've tested for an amount of like spike, which makes me think, while I'm riding, I want to eat Skittles.
That's exactly what I did this weekend. I wanted to do a 100-mile ride on Saturday, have my long endurance ride on my master's plan, and I went out to go do it. And when I had the Skittles around as my anti-cramp food too, just in case I cramped. It's early in the season, in those big days. And I finished with a bag full of Skittles still, so cramping was low. But it's pretty hilarious. I had them in my bar bag, and when I'd hit a bump, Skittles would just like fly all over the place. So taste the rainbow. One quick thing that Nate mentioned, when I was talking about like, this is how many kilojoules you burn in an hour if you're riding at this power, and this is how many grams of carbs that would be. And Nate, you pointed out like you wouldn't be burning all carbs with that. There's a really tricky thing, a temptation that I see a lot of athletes go into, where they try to divinate like, well, during this workout, I will burn primarily fat or primarily carbohydrate or this sort of percentage. So I'll reduce it by this. And that video that we just made is like very numbers centric and focused on that. And if that's your tendency and that's your approach, that's a really hard thing to recommend ever doing, because of the fact that like your oxidation rates and the different substrates that you're using and the rates, that fluctuates wildly depending on a lot of different factors. It's impossible to say that if you're riding at 70% FTP, it's going to use 80% of this and 20% of that. It's more complex. It's more fluid. It matters in terms of what you've been doing recently up to that, chronically. In the end, if you can have this perspective that if I fuel the work and I enable that to happen, and then outside of my training, I'm focusing on long-term health. During the training, I focus on fueling the work. You will then become more capable of doing more work. And as those two increase in relation to each other, as you fuel more and you're able to do more, in other words, your FTP goes up, or your ability to perform at a higher percentage of your FTP or your fractional utilization, as that goes up, then you just become more capable of doing more work. And doing more work within reason, not like, maybe some like crazy ultra thing that's like, 20 days in a row or something, I don't know, probably is very unhealthy. But doing more work within reason for all of us is a great path toward better health. It's just a great solution to it. So if you can kind of have that focus, I fuel the work and that enables me to do more, that is really motivating.
Jonathan, so are you saying that it's not a fair assumption to say that if I ride at this power, I'm just going to burn 100% fat and my body knows to do that at this power and I don't have to eat anything? I have unlimited stores in my body.
We dream of that.
Yeah, are you saying
Right?
that's not
Yeah.
right? That's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, not likely. I mean, there are some athletes that can achieve extremely high rates of fat adaptation, and it's a really complex thing to go about. And perhaps it's inherently very individualistic, like forever. That, you know, and some people are better at that than others.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, we're a system of faders that's constantly changing. We're not these light switches.
And you can do that too if you want to be like a totally fat adapted athlete. You're not going to go as fast or get as high, but you can totally do ultra events that way. To John's point, okay, so my FTP now is probably around 200. Old FTP topped to like, what, 365? And the
Yeah.
longer it's been, the higher it goes since was it 370, 367 or 370? I forget. It's something like that, but probably 400.
400. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
So now like 200, 210 watts for me feels so incredibly hard and I can barely hold that. And if you think about the amount of calories, because, you know, the higher the wattage is, the more calories per minute or second that you're burning. You know, I'm almost half as fit as I was before. So for every hour of riding, I'm going to do a little more than half the calories. And then also because my endurance is so low, I can't go long. An hour, I am hooked. So like before I think at Leadville, I did like 210 normalized watts for 9 hours at 14,000 feet. Now I couldn't, like, doing that for an hour. You put a gun to my head and be able to do that. That's insane. So that's what we talk about when you focus for the upside, the higher FTP. In our training too, why we don't just do a whole bunch of long and slow, we try to raise that FTP. When you get to those 5 watts per kilo, the 4, you know, that I did that video, that top percentile, you're in like that 1 percentile, that 2 percentile, you can start to change these things and adjust yourself. Maybe probably even before that, you can start to make a change on that. But if you're beginning, you can jump up so fast compared to other people. And we see that all the time, actually for a long time. I don't know if I never needed to go the other side. Plus I didn't have the time to do those 20-hour days or 20-hour weeks. John did a 20-hour day.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Did you ever, Sean? I forgot.
You know, yeah.
Every time it's like
below,
5 hours.
Link below in the description.
So.
Yeah. I'll share it for people. That's like the paradox, right, Alex? Because there's a difference between a lot of endurance athletes and, you know, a lot of us may experience to some degree or another, some form of body dysmorphia in the sense that we assume that like, I need to lose a lot of weight. When in reality, if you look at the general population, you're wonderfully fit and your body composition is likely healthy. But we have a self-critical type A athletes have tendencies to look at that small percentage of something and we magnify that into something that it really isn't. I want to separate us, those people, because that's totally my mindset. And I wrestle with that all the time. So that's why I'm saying us. I'll just say me. I want to separate me from the fact that there are also people that are listening to this. They're like, well, I have 75 pounds to lose. I have more than that. And how do I go about this? And it's ironic and frustrating that those athletes can't burn more calories, but they're not capable of doing the work yet if they're new to the sport and they have a low FTP. As they progress, they'll be able to burn more and go longer, and as a result, have a higher burn rate and work rate. Is it a totally different approach, Alex, for the athletes that do need to lose a lot of weight for general health reasons?
Yeah. I mean, for me, with the cyclists that we've been working with a lot this year, body dysmorphia is definitely something we see quite a bit. And they're really honed in on maximizing their power to weight ratio. And so for them, they get really honed in on the number on the scale. And first and foremost, I want to make sure that the weight that they want to lose is realistic for them. And is it going to be a weight that they reach that's going to be healthy and easily for them to maintain? Those are a couple things that kind of crossed my mind initially. I can think of one cyclist in mind who was very, very tall, and he estimated his body fat percentage was around like 10%. I mean, he's really lean, but so he's like still was wanting to lose weight. And I was like, dude, I don't think we're going to be able to take much off of you without you like losing muscle mass and strength. And that's not a good thing either. But in his mind, he was really wanting to maximize that power to weight ratio, but he just is so tall that it wasn't really realistic for him to reach a certain number on the scale. So it kind of depends on your body type too. You know, some people are just genetically a little bit heavier, muscular person, and versus someone that might be a little bit more on the petite side and lighter. So you have to kind of pay attention to that as well.
Yeah. How do you handle it if somebody comes to you and says, I want to lose 75 pounds, like a significant amount of weight, and it's body fat that needs to be lost?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you handle that?
Well, I guess I need them to be really patient because that's not something that's going to be, an instant thing. It's going to be a long-term focus. So I also look at, okay, you're wanting to train for these events. So let's kind of periodize your year. And when are you going to focus on weight loss and body composition? And when are we just going to focus on fueling for performance so that you can feel really great in your training, have a really successful race, and then we can kind of swap to, in your off season, we can focus on the weight loss. So I think that's really important too. And maybe even during their in season, they see some weight loss as well. It just might not be our priority as well. So I think that's really important. If there's a large volume of weight they're wanting to lose, to be really patient. It's not going to be a couple months. You're going to see that. Like we want to do it the slow and steady way so that we're really honing in on just body fat loss. We're not losing muscle with that and strength. And it's something that would gradually achieve over time.
That's something that's so complicated to achieve over that long-term scale too, because it can be really frustrating.
Their mindset can get really frustrated because they have this goal in mind, but you have to kind of think of it as a process, like just a progressive way of getting there, not like, oh, I'm going to feel better and I'll be able to perform at the level I want to once I reach that weight. It's like, no, you're still got to live your life during this process. So that's something too, is making sure they're in the right mindset of like, let's still enjoy life and enjoy your training and enjoy your racing while you're working towards this goal.
I had a big body comp shift after I had my first 2 babies and building TrainerRoad. And I say had as in I was supporting.
Yeah.
But I was, I think I was like 210 pounds. I was pretty like, it was a fat, or not a fat, but it was based on it was mostly fat gain and not muscle gain. And then when we did the DEXA challenge, and a DEXA is this machine you can go into, and it's a dual density X-ray. I don't know. It can measure your fat and your muscle mass in your body. And we were doing it kind of every month or every 2 months. And I worked really hard and I was very consistent on my diet, training, and weight training, like my cycling training. And I did weight training because I wanted to maintain muscle mass as I was in a caloric deficit for losing some fat, right? It's like, okay, I lost 3 pounds. Sweet. That's pretty good. And I went in there and the DEXA though showed I lost 7 pounds of fat and gained 4 pounds of muscle. And I could just imagine if I lost 4 pounds of fat and gained 4 pounds of muscle and it was 0 on the scale and I was training so hard, like I would take that trade all day long though. And inside of it, so that aspect too, when you first start getting training, your scale's dropping faster than I think you realize it is. If you have access to a DEXA, I think we just went to a scanning place and I didn't need a doctor's notes. You can just pay $50 and get it. And it was super motivating though to see that. And I was like, wow, there's more than just the number. Plus then my FTP went up. I was burning more. It's like this snowball that happens. And it's so easy though to get stuck in that. Or how about this? Who here, we have 4 actual professionals here, has ever think they had body dysmorphia?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I
struggle with it.
Alex hasn't.
Present,
Had.
past tense.
Yeah.
This morning.
Yeah.
But it's pretty common. I just want to say that it is extremely common. It's not just for a certain type of athlete or a certain type of person. All 3 of us are at very different levels. And yeah, definitely have experienced it myself.
Yeah. And there's a wide spectrum of body dysmorphia as well. Like there's varying, intensities and varying experiences within it. So this is why, and this is going to sound like a plug for Alex Larson and Alex Larson Nutrition here, but like Rowan's talking about general health. And I know that we talk about making yourself faster and everything else. That's cool. We get a huge amount of satisfaction out of that. But on the general health side of things, and because that can be such a long road when you're talking about losing a lot of weight and trying to do all that, this is why people like Alex, you should, in my mind, be paying somebody like Alex to be able to help you through this, because this is something like you see like Jeff Bezos spending billions of dollars on trying to like live forever. And like for general health reasons, if you can lose that weight, there's like such a direct cause to all cause mortality with obesity. And it's such a hard thing to do, to like reverse that. And that's why you need people in your corner. And I think that's why, you want people like Alex or any other dietitian that you're working with or anything else. But that's why I feel like in those situations, it's so crucial. Like if you're on the fence and you don't really know what to do, or you've tried something and you lost motivation, get somebody in your corner to help you, because it's worth it. Like you're adding years to your life. It's so worth it.
I can give an example too of like athletes that come in and they're like, I eat well, I exercise a lot, but my cholesterol levels are high. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It might be just strong genetic family history, but also, if you're chronically been like at a calorie deficit and underfueled, that can be a lot of stress on the body. And stress also can affect your cholesterol levels. So sometimes just improving that fueling and aligning it a little bit better can help lower your cholesterol levels. And that just goes to show like how the body is all connected. You know what I mean? Like everything's kind of impacted by these little things with nutrition. And that has a big impact on, longevity and your health, having good blood cholesterol panels.
When I think about what Jonathan just said about the nutrition or dietitian, what I always think of is, okay, so imagine in my life, this event happens. This is for anything where I need to spend some money to prevent something. I'm like, if I'm sitting in this event and if I'm in the hospital and I got diagnosed with cancer, how much would I have paid out of my pocket right then to prevent that? And I'm like, would I sell my house? I'm like, yeah. Like, would I do all these things? So should I pay like $100 a month to prevent it if it's like likely to happen? And it's a no-brainer if you think about it. And you've probably been in situations, disaster, car breaks down. And you're like, how much would I have paid to just get the oil changed earlier? Like, like to get out of this situation. Usually you end up paying so much more anyways. Plus then you have to go through this experience. It's awful. Alex, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see athletes who are, they're kind of like stuck, right? Of somewhere on the higher end. And my personal thought is usually it has to do with alcohol intake, where the people that I'm thinking of, that they drink a lot of alcohol. But what do you think could be some of the reasons why someone could be on that, not in the middle, but not really upper end, still pretty big and been training for a long time?
Could be a lot of factors. Alcohol could definitely be one, which gets to be such a sensitive subject with them too. That's usually not like the first area that I go in discussion with an athlete. If I see quite a bit of alcohol intake, I kind of wait to build some rapport with them and kind of assess like, when are we ready to talk about this? I see so many athletes that are kind of like in that cusp of like, oh, if I could just lose like 10 pounds or, just like not a huge amount of weight, but just a little bit. And it has to do with either a couple things. One, they've just been under fueling for so long. So we just like metabolically need to kind of adjust things. Or it could be they're getting enough calories, but we just need to rearrange kind of the macronutrient balance there. Because sometimes they're trying to push the protein. But with a lot of protein intake, we see the fat intake come up as well, because a lot of protein foods will also have quite a bit of fat. Even in plant-based, think of like nut butters and nuts and seeds, like just really high fat intake, which adds a lot of calories. And so if we can choose a little bit leaner protein options, get that fat intake down, make sure that we're optimizing carbohydrates and like the right timing of things, usually we see some really good results in terms of just seeing like 10 pounds weight loss can make a huge difference for them in that power to weight ratio.
If you go on and you Google like 10 pounds of fat, there's pictures of people holding what 10 pounds of fat looks like. It's a big baby.
It is.
Like it's a toddler.
Yeah.
Like what you're carrying around. Alex, what are we're still on the first question, but I just love when Alex is here. What are some of your,
that was me going through the doc, just saying, not covering this one this week, not covering, but this is a great discussion.
This is great, right? Alex, what
Yeah.
are some of your, for triathlon cyclists, what are some of your favorite lean protein intakes? Because we talk about not getting the fat too high. All fat's not evil, but if you just eat short ribs and like ribeyes and stuff, it's probably going to go a little high.
My favorite lean protein options, obviously you can go with like, your chicken, turkey, poultry is pretty darn lean there. Low fat dairy is a good option. I always like adding like a little bit of like cottage cheese to a meal, just because like a quarter cup of cottage cheese is like 7 grams of protein. It's not very much. I mean, just that like little bit of scoop can help boost things up. A lot of our athletes, because they do have a little bit higher protein needs, will do like a protein shake in there just because it is a good way to boost things up. We might use it just post-workout for timing, if they're trying to get ready to go to work in the morning, or even just using it as like an evening snack for recovery overnight. Like tofu tempeh, like soy-based protein is obviously super lean and great protein there. If they're looking for like a crunchy snack, those dried roasted edamame work really, really well. Very high in fiber, so they're really filling. Nice as a snack, and they're really light to travel with. If you're, heading on a plane, like they're just super easy to take with. Those are kind of top of mind of things that I can think of that are just really nice lean protein. Like they boost the protein up high, but you won't see the fat get too high.
Pete was trying to get me on garbanzo beans
as
like an exclusive form of protein for a long time. And I was like, man, this is boring. I can't just eat 2 cans of garbanzo beans every day. He's like, I'll just roast them up and make them crunchy. It's like a snack. I'm like, no, dude, this is boring. I don't like it.
Yeah.
It's an excellent cook.
It's a lot of fiber.
Yeah.
So like that can be just really hard on your gut if all of a sudden you're eating massive amounts of garbanzo beans or edamame. But like my favorite with garbanzo beans is to take a can of garbanzo beans and I'll like rinse them off, dry them, put just a little bit of oil on them, and then taco seasoning, and then adding them to like a taco salad or your tacos. They are so good because they're like crunchy and like kind of spicy. So those are yummy.
Maybe enough
Does
time
sound
has
good.
passed. I'll try it again.
Yeah. Yeah, but like not
Yeah.
as like not as like a whole snack, but it's just like you add it to your meal to add some nutrition and protein.
Ivy just took the can.
Yeah,
Just-
like that. Just the
These
spoon.
aren't good.
Just weeping, eating spoon after spoon.
I picture you like sitting on the back of a hatchback, like before a race, just
Yeah,
like a
just-
spoon in a can, just like
Garbanzos.
getting the carbs in.
No, thank you.
So I try to eat berries every day. And what happens with berries too is like you blink and they like go bad.
Mhm.
And it's so annoying
Yeah.
because they're expensive. What I've been better at though is like freezing them after a certain amount of days. And so when I'm late not late, just I'm busy and like we're all busy, is I do a protein shake. I do whole milk. Probably don't need to do whole milk if you're an athlete. I'm doing mostly weight training right now. Protein powder, like whey protein powder, on nutrition, creatine, and then I do those frozen berries. And I'm wondering, I do have some fat from the whole milk, but should I be I don't know if I need to add anything else, but I really like that combo of like quick. I get some carbs, I get some protein from the berry or from fiber from the berries, and I get protein from it. Alex, would you change anything on that or what do you think?
No, I kind of like that. That's fine. I personally love this. I'm not like sponsored by them, but Fairlife milk will be, it's the best. It tastes so good.
Nate talks about that all the time.
It is
He
the best.
loves
It
it.
is
Just
so
right.
good. And it's got
I do.
like way more protein. So I really like using that in smoothies. And I usually don't freeze my fruit that's going bad. I just throw it in fresh if it's just looking a little not appealing to eat fresh. So I'll just make smoothies with that. Or you can add like a little bit of spinach or even avocado works well in there too.
Ooh, that's a good idea. Spinach. I don't get enough greens.
Yeah.
I go to certain grocery stores just for Fairlife milk. And especially for my kids, it's got like 50% more protein
Yeah.
per serving and they drink a lot of milk.
Yeah.
So I
that's
can
what my
give them
kids drink too.
more of that. And I read something that said like height is expressed by like, I think 60 or 40%, I forget which one, by protein intake. So the genetics, and I'm actually a pretty tall guy. If they don't have protein though, they're not going to develop to their full size.
Mhm.
And my son doesn't like very much meat at all. So I try to give him that.
Yeah. I buy the Fairlife whole milk for my kids and they love it.
I do that too. One more thing. Sorry, then you can move on, John. I don't think I've said this on the podcast, but I am so like, as now I'm almost 42. I'm so anti-alcohol. I think it's going to be, we're going to look back and it's going to be like smoking. We're like, how could we do this? And if you look at like impacts on long-term health, I think we saw before that there's, back in the 90s, it was like, if you drink a glass of red wine, it's going to help. And they re-looked at those studies and been like, actually, it wasn't a legit study. And it turns out that no amount of alcohol is helpful for you. And it just has so many negative impacts and you're really hurting your life. And you think, I need this to de-stress or stuff like that. There are other modern techniques that were not even modern, just old time breath work and stuff like that, meditation therapy that can get you feeling better long-term, that you don't have these like ups and down spikes all the time of, I feel bad, I need to drink, and then I feel better. And you might not even realize you're doing it. If you're drinking alcohol, I would look into that more and challenge why you need to, or if you really should. And it's weird because you go to the restaurant, it's a drug, right? I'm like, everyone here is doing drugs. Like, if you think about it, but we call it alcohol and it's not that. But really, everyone here is doing drugs to feel like loopy and they're like making it in front of you all fancy. It's nuts.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It's,
Tell me why I'm wrong in the
certainly if
comic section so this podcast gets boosted a bunch. And
you're-
then tell the other people why alcohol is not good. So let's start a debate.
Yeah. Actually, and share studies that show that alcohol is beneficial or show that alcohol isn't beneficial. Share them in the comments so then we can look into those. That'd be an interesting thing to look at, like the commonly referenced studies that are like the hallmark studies that are used for this and go through.
That'd be a good video for you, John, to do.
Yeah.
So that's the controversial. People not want to la 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 la. They won't want to hear it.
Yeah. Earmuffs. Yeah.
Especially, studies about beer and recovery specifically. We were always like, yay, green card to just drink beer after
Yeah.
races. Yeah.
It's really cool though. Lewis Hamilton, big F1 fan, big fan of Lewis Hamilton's too. And he's just released, some sort of, I think it's like an alcohol-free tequila. We have athletic brewing. We have all these other things that like tons of great options that are coming out that are non-athletic. 10 years ago even. Like if you would have told the world that like this would be happening, like we would have not believed it. So I do like to think that maybe we are recognizing that. And then the social aspect of, because really it's amazing because a lot of people that did drink for the social aspect and then maybe some that stop afterward, you can still maintain the social activity that you have with your friends and everything else just the same.
Yeah, and if they give you a hard time about it, they're not your friends. Ew.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. And
yeah.
Yeah.
I just get
Super helpful.
mocktails now, and you can have the same fun. And John gets like sparkling water with lime, and you're like, oh, I don't want the sugar in the mocktails. Well, you're getting alcohol, like as the other choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can do sugar-free stuff too. And wait, well, you said something else that was important before that. It was those drinks. There are other drinks too that will have like L-theanine or like lion's mane in them, and they're designed to kind of relax you to get that same kind of like, oh, I'm relaxed in the evening kind of vibe, or with your friends, but without the alcohol intake.
I will
Yeah.
say I've had some clients, the biggest challenge with alcohol is for them with their job. And when they like take clients out to dinner and it's expected that they have a drink with the client. And so they feel so much pressure. And that is really hard to break for them because if they're trying to like close a sale, that is really tough for them. And I feel for that.
As an N=1 on this, of a person that has gone into those environments for years and not done it, I was so worried about that for so many years. And I think that part of it also is our culture is
Yes,
changing
I would
around
agree.
that. Like it's
Mhm.
much more permissive to just be like, yeah, drink whatever you'd like. It's totally okay. But I've never once had a situation, I've had people rib me and be like, oh, come on, don't you want to? And it stops there. Like, when you're a teenager or something else, it might be different. And like Ivy said, if it goes beyond that, they aren't your friends. And in a business setting, that isn't professional of them. And that's okay. But if anybody feels compromised like that, you don't have to like just try it. Trust the fact that if you do this because you're being true to yourself, that it will work out. And I'm confident good people will respect that. So.
And if you're really worried about it, you can always tell the waiter ahead of time, just give me a virgin one, like whatever it is. And they'll do it
Yep.
too. Also, you can tell people, we're on the West Coast in America, so maybe it's different in different parts of the world. But if you're in like the South in America or the South in the US, saying I don't drink, or, some people are in recovery for alcohol and stuff like that. And people are just, like John said, people don't even try to push. But yeah, it's.
I'm here in the Midwest. I'm like 15 minutes from Wisconsin. And so it's a little different here. Like they really like their
right?
beer.
Yeah. Part of the culture.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, for
But
sure.
even with that, I always do the Midwest too. If someone orders a non-alcoholic beer, everyone's just like, good for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's cool you're with me doing it, but I've never seen someone who orders an alcoholic drink be like, no, you need to drink. Because it's like, people understand that people have their own reasons for it.
Yeah.
Maybe in Europe,
Yeah.
though, too, it's different. I don't know.
Maybe we can actually have some commiseration in the comments. If any of you have had success with this, like let other people know. So then somebody can go to this YouTube video and
That'd
find
be great.
support for it. Be awesome. Okay, Matt's question says, love the show, always helpful. And by the way, if you're enjoying this podcast, give it a thumbs up, hit the bell. Only 4% of you on YouTube that subscribe to our YouTube channel also hit the bell for notifications. And that just tells you when we publish a new video. That's a very small percentage. That conversion rate should go up. Those are real numbers. So if y'all want to click on that, that would be amazing.
Question
and-
2.
Yes. Says, I've been struggling with sleep for about a year now. Over the last year, I can remember 1 to 2 days where I awoke feeling recovered and ready to go. I did a sleep study and it stated that I had mild apnea. I tried a CPAP, but it hasn't improved anything for me. In terms of supplements, I've tried Ambien, melatonin, magnesium, etc., but it hasn't helped either. I know Nate has had a long struggle with this, and I'd like to hear his anecdotal solutions. I've consulted physicians, but it seems like they aren't offering good solutions, and I'm just left paying out more money. The lack of sleep is affecting my training, and my body weight is gone by 25 pounds. I'm really hoping to break this cycle, so thanks for any guidance you can provide. Maybe some like anecdotes, Nate, from you, but then Alex, I'd really be interested in your perspective from like a nutritionist perspective on this too.
Yeah, sleep apnea, serious business. The long-term health effects are huge. So anything that I say that helped me, like you got to work with a doctor and you got to like retest for sleep apnea. You don't want that thing to go away. And when you say that, the CPAP didn't help, do you mean it didn't prevent the events while you were sleeping? Or are you saying that like I didn't feel different? With me, I had moderate sleep apnea. It's actually, now that I've lifted weights, actually it's gone away, which I view that as connection to the muscle in my neck, but I'm not sure. I just haven't had an issue anymore, which is really crazy. But the sleep apnea, what happens is while you're sleeping, you stop breathing. And I first did this for my ex-wife, which hear me and while I was sleeping, I would like choke and go and kind of like gasp to wake up. So being diagnosed, like having a partner in bed can really help you understand. So everyone go out and try to find someone to.
Everybody couple
sleep.
up so that you
Couple up.
can diagnose
For your
our
own
health issues.
Yeah.
Tinder stock goes up.
And
Yeah.
for me, classically, it's usually.
I'm looking for somebody to help diagnose my sleep apnea. I'm on Twitter, on Tinder. Imagine
I'm going to put that on my Tinder. That's awesome.
Just matching left and
Yeah, count my apneas per hour. I'll give you a sheet.
That's amazing.
Usually it's like associated with older people and people that are obese. And what happens is your throat collapses while you sleep. For me, it was a positional thing, is that when I'd have studies, if I was on my back, that's when I'd have apneas. On my side, I would not. And some people even have things because they don't want to wear a CPAP because they can be annoying. They'll have like a tennis ball sewn into the back of their shirt or a special pillow to try to keep them on their side. Other things that can happen is like a narrow jaw, like a big tongue. I had 3 sinus surgeries, which I think also were connected to the apnea for breathing. I forget
When you say connected, do you mean beneficial for or caused?
Yeah, I think
Nutritional?
I had issues with my whole airway, right, where I couldn't barely breathe out of my nose. I had a deviated septum. I had 2 turbinate reductions to be able to breathe better. And then the final one that was the best with also with my sinus infections were they put this balloon into my sinus and they blew it up and I could hear it crack and it made my sinuses bigger. That allowed my sinuses to drain finally. And then I didn't have like 8 sinus infections per year. I went from 8 to 0, which was insane just on that one. It was an outpatient procedure. And the other turbinate reductions where they go and they shave some part of your sinus down, and the deviated septum one, and getting my tonsils out. Tonsils is another thing that they thought could help it. Those are all like put you under huge recovery. So that the balloon thing, I don't even know what it's called, but was amazing. Talk to your doctor. In terms of supplements too, I would not call Ambien a supplement.
Yeah.
Or melatonin or magnesium. Those things might make you go to sleep, but they're not going to help with apnea. This is really tough, especially with the effect of your training and go up 25 pounds. It like lowers testosterone. It increases risks of cancer, like all forms of like death. It increases. If you look at it, like sleep is so important. It's just so hard because I want to give you like a solution and I can't other than like wear the CPAP and keep going with that. Because if you wear the CPAP and your events are down and you're still tired, this also happened to me. I had ADHD that was undiagnosed and it was a separate thing. And me getting out of bed had more to do with dopamine and stress than it did with sleep apnea. Sleep apnea helped reduce that and improve it. It was like a one of many things. And I was also, I was married and had issues with that and stress with work and all of that. And I would use caffeine in order to get going. That was a stimulant that would help the ADHD. Adderall has really been life-changing in terms of that, to be able to get out of bed and move around. And antidepressive, Wellbutrin too. And that could also be depression, could be linked to this. So what I'm saying is I had many issues and just solving one, I had to get a jackpot. I had to solve all the issues in order to kind of have that increase in life. So solve this, use the CPAP, have no events, and then start talking to other people. I would say either mental. I guess it's all mental. I don't know. Talk to other doctors and mental health and stuff. It is a journey. I went to like the Mayo Clinic to try to figure it out while I was so tired, and I would sleep 12 hours and still be in bed all day long. And it was a mix for me between depression and ADHD. And 2, when I got them treated, I'm not sure if the depression helped the ADHD or that when I was treated for ADHD, that lowered the depression because I was getting out of bed and I was doing things more than before.
Yeah. Thanks, Nate, for sharing your perspective on it.
You're welcome.
I feel like we can put all of that stuff, like leave that as it is, in the sense that like it's got to be really frustrating to feel like you're just going to doctors and not getting clear answers or not getting a clear solution. But I do think that they're probably where a lot of the help resides. Alex, can we compartmentalize that and then take like a nutritionist perspective on this? Like, are there certain things that you've noticed, like trends with athletes that might be in this situation? Because maybe there's some nutritional guidance that's a lot cheaper and more actionable for this person to put into place that might help. Like Nate said, it's probably not going to solve it, right? Like you need all 4 things to roll down on the jackpot, but it might help.
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. Caffeine would be one. If you're not waking up like feeling recovered and ready to go most days of the week, you might be using caffeine to kind of help get you through the day. So keep in mind that caffeine takes about 8 hours to fully leave your system. So if you're struggling to fall asleep in the evening, make sure that you think of your bedtime, count back 8 hours, and that's like your last time that you're consuming caffeine for the day. The other thing that I tend to see with athletes, it's not that they come in saying I'm sleeping really poorly, but they notice that once they start improving nutrition and we get them fueling enough, they notice that they sleep much better throughout the night. And I think that has to do honestly with hormones getting back to, like I said, that stress. When your body's really stressed, sometimes we don't sleep as well. So we can get hormones regulated back to normal because you're just fueling better and fueling more consistently. We tend to see our athletes sleeping better as well. But yeah, that stress is a big piece of that. And I would say probably with the body weight going up 25 pounds, that would be my biggest indicator right there, that there's some sort of stress response going on like that.
Yeah. I feel like the big thing with this too, or just a thing that you could be falling into, depending on when you train during the day too, right, Alex? Because timing your nutrition with that sort of thing, like if you're going to bed completely depleted or you're training in the morning really depleted and that sort of thing, and you're kind of getting caught into the cycle, you can be driven down to that like low energy availability, and it's really tough to get back on top of it if you go to bed hungry all the time or you just wake up and train without fueling. Awesome. Okay. So
I want
let's
to
go
say
into
that
the next one.
it is a
go ahead.
cycle between all of this. It is the so you like caffeine. Thumbs up. I'm sorry. It just I don't know. It is a cycle between late caffeine or late training. You can't sleep well. That could also be related to depression. You wake up in the morning and then you don't want to get out of bed, so you do more caffeine. You wait. You procrastinate your workout. You feel bad about yourself because you haven't done anything. You train late, and then the issue happens again. And then you're like, oh, but then maybe you skip a day, and you're like, you know what I'm going to do is just not eat because I didn't train yesterday,
Yes.
so I don't have the earn this, and then that increases the depression. And then you don't sleep as well. And it's just this cycle that keeps going and going and going and going and going. And really what Alex said, like, I feel so much better. I do a giant salad with like nuts and fruit and vegetables and spinach, and then don't have any caffeine after like noon. And just that alone will change your life. Like,
Oh, yeah.
it's crazy. And for us too, the extra nitrates in that spinach will really help us train. There is science on that.
You know, what Nate was saying too about trying to find help to figure out sleep apnea and just get care, and what Matt is also describing, saying consulted physicians, it seems like they weren't really offering good solutions. It just reminds me of, and is a good reminder for athletes and just like everyone, how hard it is sometimes to advocate for yourself to get help medically. Like, Matt, you're not alone in this. Like, especially women struggle with this a lot. Like, we'll have legitimate medical emergencies, and I have a handful of close friends that have been dismissed, like, oh, woman on period, go home, and like ruptured appendix or something crazy, you know? And so those are extreme examples, but it's really hard when you're talking about things like sleep apnea and hormone levels and what can be causing all these issues to really fight for just getting like a blood work panel is like really hard sometimes. So Matt, like, I feel for you when you say that you've consulted physicians and haven't been happy with what you've gotten. Like, that's tough, and keep trying to get help. I know it's hard. It feels like an uphill battle, but you just have to keep trying to get help.
Between like therapists, psychiatrists, and doctors that I have like talked to with this, probably 10. And it was my last psychiatrist, and it was the first appointment. She just is like, describe your life. And she's asking me some questions, and she's like, you hit every single marker of ADHD. Let's start you on some Adderall. And she's like, she treated my sister. Like, your sister also has it. And then it was just like, that was it. Everything changed. And I had like, for those who don't know, it's should be called like executive function disorder. It's ADHD seems like you're going to be hyperactive. It's basically, I can't control my focus unless I'm hyper focused on something, and I can't make myself do stuff. It's kind of like, if I told everyone who doesn't have it, like, touch this hot stove, you could physically do it, but it would be so hard for you to actually touch it. And that's what it can feel like to get out of bed. And you might think that, hey, I just didn't sleep well. That's why I don't want to get out of bed. It's so much easier to sit here on my phone and like doom scroll, which would also be depression. It's like, they're all interlinked. And it was just so validating to know that, like, hey, I'm just not a lazy person. And I was able to build TrainerRoad because I get hyper focused. John, you pretty see me in meetings. Like, if I get hyper focused on something, I will go like 3 hours, and everyone's like, can we break? I'm like, why would you break? Like, let's talk
Scrambling.
about this. Let's go.
I'm just hitching on to Nate's train, and I'm hoping I can stay on.
But if it's something like
Yeah.
taxes that I don't like to deal with, or accounting, I'm like, oh, this is so hard. I don't want to go to this meeting. And I just like, my mind wanders.
Yeah, but Nate, it was so
anyways.
hard for you to like find that person that to them it was so
So
clear,
hard.
so obvious,
So-
like right away what you were experiencing, and so such a, you know, in theory, easy fix. And think about how many healthcare practitioners you had to see to find this person. You know, it's really can be so discouraging.
I signed up for this executive Mayo Clinic health thing, and I flew to Minnesota and drove to Rochester and like spent like 2 nights there and did this whole panel thing. And the guy's like, I don't know what it is. And I saw multiple doctors. I saw like 4 or 5 doctors and did cardio tests and sleep apnea tests that I was okay with in the CPAP. But I'm just saying, you might have to see multiple people. I mean, you've already seen one person that didn't fix it, so I would see multiple people. Don't just listen to the one doctor and then find other doctors.
Yeah, don't give up,
Yep.
Matt.
We're here with you. You're not the only one. Somebody else is probably going through something. Probably supporting you in the comments. Let them know. Elena's question says, my question is for the women of the podcast. I hope you'll consider covering it. Yes, absolutely, Elena. This year, I've stopped taking birth control. My cycle has finally returned to a consistent schedule, but I've noticed that it seems like my performance potential is more affected by my period now. I've tried altering my training load and intensity for different phases of my cycle, but I feel like this actually hasn't been necessary. Instead, the biggest thing I notice seems to be how my body reacts to nutrition and hydration. And I'm wondering if I should be adjusting either the fluid amount, sodium, and or carbohydrate amount I'm taking in depending on where I'm at in my cycle. Do you all have any advice for this? Alex?
Yeah.
your thought. You lead.
You and Nate, you talk amongst yourselves, and Ivy and I will take care of this.
Hey guys,
We'll see you in a
go
bit.
get some coffee. We'll see you later.
Yeah.
Welcome to Coffee Talk. All right. So what's really exciting about this is that there recently has been more and more research on female athletes and fueling around the menstrual cycle. So I think probably in the past 2 years, I think we've started to see research studies come out and actually give us some really good actionable advice. So let's break down the menstrual cycle into the 2 phases. So there's the follicular phase and the luteal phase, and the follicular phase that begins the day that you get your period until about day 14. And then ovulation is the beginning of the luteal phase, and that goes to about day 28, depending on how long your cycle is. And if you find that your cycle is really short or it's really long, there might be some hormonal dysfunction going on that might need to be addressed as well. But with the follicular phase, hormones are going to be at their lowest. So this is actually when many women are going to feel their strongest and they're going to recover the fastest. So this is a great time to shoot for higher intensity workouts. If you're racing, shoot for a PR. Your body is going to really use carbs very well and efficiently during this time. So definitely look to fueling with the carbs, reloading those glycogen levels. A couple things though is those first few days of your period, we tend to see some bloating, some water retention. That's pretty common. So this is the time to really focus on staying hydrated. You might want to just watch your sodium intake a little bit there just to kind of help alleviate some of the bloating. But you might also just notice that because your body is taking in those carbs so well that you might just see your glycogen stores are a little bit higher. And so with those glycogen stores being higher, we do tend to see a little bit of you feel just a little bit puffier because with glycogen, you see some water stored with that as well. And then the luteal phase, you will want to bump up your protein intake just because our hormone levels are much higher than estrogen and progesterone. So it's going to make it harder to build and maintain muscle mass. So just keeping a little bit higher protein intake will help support that. And then something that women aren't really aware of during the luteal phase, we do have a higher basal metabolic rate. So about 10 to 20% increase. So adding in a little snack during the day, a little protein rich snack, 100 to 300 calories somewhere in there can really help just support that, because what happens is you feel a little bit more hungry and you get a little afraid of oh, I'm so hungry. I don't want to eat more because I don't want to gain weight. There's this little bit of fear there. And then by the time that you get to your period, your body is so overly hungry. That's where we tend to see us overeating in that situation. So just keep that in mind that when you get into that luteal phase, that it's okay to have a little extra snack so that you don't get overly hungry and start, eating everything in your kitchen kind of situation. So those are my biggest tips to fueling around your cycle that way. But just make sure first and foremost that you're eating well, you've got a good foundation, and then you can hone in on the little details of where you are in your cycle as well.
I almost guarantee that that's what Elena is experiencing.
Yeah.
And that's what I for sure experienced. That's why it's important as an athlete to track your menstrual cycle and know it helps you realigns your expectations for training and performance. But also, I think what Elena is experiencing is for recovery as well. When what you're describing, Alex, is such a higher need for calories. And I'm sure that if Elena isn't cognizant of that and compensating for what is really needed during that time period, then of course, once that phase is over, it's not like a switch flips and suddenly you're yeah, you don't need as much now. That can really carry over weeks and weeks if you really mess up during this time period and are under fueling. And so I'm sure that's what Elaine is experiencing when it's whoa, what's this affecting my hydration and on the bike nutrition? What's happening? I'm sure it's carrying over much longer than just the luteal phase,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And another thing too is for women on an IUD that don't get their period and then they have no idea where they're even at in their cycle, that can make things a little challenging too. But sometimes with birth control, it just kind of helps stabilize hormones a little bit more. But that's another thing too. We're needing more and more research and information. We're just starting to get into it. So I'm excited to see, in the next 5-10 years, what type of more research we get and get a little more clarity under this topic.
If you are on birth control, would you have the same would it be impacted the same way?
It would depend on the birth control because there's the mini pill and then there's, your normal pill and then there's IUDs. So it just depends on and even some birth control isn't even hormonal. There's, the copper IUD it just depends on what type you're on.
I'm thinking of hormonal orthotricycline kind of standard.
Yeah, I'd have to look and see how that impacts hormones. I don't know off the top of my head, but yes, in terms of your cycle, I would say that you can still follow the guidelines that I provided in terms of fueling yourself.
Is there a favorite menstrual cycle tracking app? I have a point to this.
Yeah, let me see. There's a couple that I recommended in the past, like Flow, FLO, or there's another one. I think it's called Clue. There's a couple free apps that you can use.
Yeah, I think those are the big ones. And those integrate into Apple Health, I'm pretty sure.
So,
yeah. So my point is if you're listening to this and you're a woman, please start recording it and putting it into Apple Health so that we can pull that data later. Because what we want to do is have adaptive training, edit your workouts based on where you are in your phase. And what we need is lots of examples, like a history of this, so that we can use our machine learning to figure out, like Alex said, we need more research. Hey, we're the ones that can do it, to figure out what the difference is. I mentioned this in my CEO update that I did, is we have a machine learning that will predict how well you're going to do on workouts based on your past experience. By predicting how well you can do, we can then change your workout, right? If we predict that it's going to be harder than it should be, we can change that workout. And what we can then do it as a macro level is say, if we add this feature, this is where you are in your cycle, and it does get harder or it does get easier, like what the result is, then we can give some actual data about how much this impacts you. And then later on, if we can put in if you are on certain birth controls, layer that in to kind of tease things out about hormonal versus not versus IUD. That would also be pretty interesting, but we need the data. So we could push women's health and fitness research ahead, I think would be really, really cool. And if we figure something out, we would then share that with the world to say what we saw.
And it's worth stating too that it's that sort of data, we wouldn't know who that belongs to. When we're looking at that, it's not like we're looking at an individual by name and looking at that, but rather it's scale. Our models so it's private.
Yeah, what would happen is that it
share any data like that.
It would be associated. Yeah, we never share any with anyone. It would be associated with your account, but then the machine learning just doesn't know anything and just comes out with generalities. And then when it runs through, it would do it anonymously, just like your training, your location data, and all that kind of stuff. We don't look at that or share that with anybody.
Yep.
Yeah, and all the information I gave is also on my blog. We've really built out our female athlete nutrition information. So if you head to my website and on the blog, you'll see a whole category for female athlete nutrition. And so we have a whole blog post on fueling around your workout. So if you're taking notes vigorously, just go there because a lot of that information is on there.
And what's the blog?
So it's alexlarsennutrition.com and then just / blog. So you'll see there's a whole category for the female stuff.
Alex, do you find that, Elena said that this year I've stopped taking birth control and my cycle has finally returned to consistent schedule, but that could have been a month ago or 6 months ago. Do you find with other athletes, I know a lot of female athletes that once they stop taking birth control, it takes their body such a long time to get back into a normal state. And not just talking about menstrual cycle, like energy levels and like body composition. It's a really big change that your body undergoes when you suddenly stop taking hormones like that. Is that something you've experienced with athletes that work with you, or have you had any experience with that?
I haven't seen that too much with our female athletes. When I read this, at first, when she said my cycle finally returned to a consistent schedule, I also was like, oh, I wonder if there was a nutritional piece as well, because sometimes female athletes will lose their period just from
REDs.
Yeah,
right?
REDs, for sure. And so we did have one athlete this year who didn't even tell me up front that she hadn't been getting a consistent period. But then a couple months in, she was so excited to report that it had came back and it was consistently coming back. And she was continuing to perform really well. So that was exciting for her and for us, because she didn't disclose that at first, which is fine. But we were really happy to hear that, because if she had told us that up front, that would have been our top priority, number one. We'd be like, okay, we need to work on getting that back. But it just happened kind of just perk of, just feeling better for her. So.
All right. Last question is from Ryder. Says, what's up, TrainerRoad? I'm a college freshman and thoroughly enjoying my first year of collegiate cycling, if you know what I mean. It says, I've got a question about taking in too much sodium. I've heard you guys say that if you take in too much sodium, you just sweat it out. But I recently had an extreme scenario where at the end of a big night of pre-race festivities involving a skyscraper of Domino's pizza and wings and a lot of PBR and Fireball while camping at the race venue, I had the bright idea to be responsible and mix my bottles before going to bed. I, of course, have no clue how this could have happened. I ended up mixing 2 bottles worth of electrolyte mix, which was 3,000 milligrams, in one 500 milliliter bottle. I didn't realize this until I started my XCO race, and of course, I had already sodium loaded before the race, taking in 1,500 milligrams. When racing XC, I like to drink electrolytes and eat my carbs through gels. So I took in a gel after the start chaos settled, then took a gulp of the only thing worse than a fireball shot that I've taken in a race. I figured that even though it tasted terrible, I might as well drink it because it seemed a more favorable option to not drinking anything. But toward the end of the 1 hour and 45-minute race, and after taking on 100 grams of carbs, which is my normal rate for a race this long, my gut felt like I ate a hot bag of rocks, and I had to take an emergency diarrhea stop in the woods on the last lap.
The diarrhea.
Now, I know what you're thinking, but the activities from the night before are normal for us every race, and I haven't had this issue yet. So based on this, and he says in asterisk, very scientific experiment, I declare the only feasible cause for this is the insane amounts of sodium I took in. But is this right? Could too much sodium cause my stomach to explode like this? Or does that only happen with carbs? Many thanks to our ever faithful podcast guides.
Oh, Ryder. Sweet angel, baby.
Should we go to Ivy first on this one?
Well, yeah, man. First of all, only mix your bottles sober. We know this now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to isolate where the cause of the diarrhea and all your GI issues. It'd be pretty hard to say, exactly it's because it's the sodium. Like, it's the sodium's fault, it's the drink mix fault. Like, that's what happened. Like, are you sure not the skyscraper of Domino's and wings and Fireball from yesterday? Yeah, I'm sure that Alex can agree, but I don't think it was just the drink mix. Like, yes, too much sodium can cause issues, whether they're GI or not. I'm not sure, but I think it probably has to do with the rest of the happenings before race that has something to do with that.
Yeah, I think it just feels like
What do
the
you think,
perfect
Alex?
storm of GI issues there. But
Poor kid.
yeah. But like hypernatremia, major side effect of that is the diarrhea. So I mean, the poor food choices and alcohol the evening before, the high intake of sodium. I mean, like I said, probably a perfect storm and caused that explosion to happen. And I don't want to sound too much of like a mother here, but maybe might be a good idea to change up your routine the night before a race. I don't know how serious you are about racing, but you're basically just relying on your youth to get you through this, because you get a day over 30 and you're not even going to make it to the start line doing that as your routine the night before. So that's my advice is, party it up any other time, but the night before a race, like, let's be reasonable and take the race seriously, and then, party it up the next night.
Thinking of like the osmotic imbalance that it causes, right? In the sense that, like, if you have a ton of sodium, and then what's going to happen is that's going to cause your body is really good at trying to balance things out. So it's going to pull water out of all of your cells, which is probably going to make it so that you can't perform well as well. It's going to inhibit glycolysis and everything else that's going on. But when it pulls all that water into your digestive tract to try to dilute this and to try to pull it into your blood to try to dilute and everything else, it's going to give you diarrhea. And then it also causes irritation when there's too much sodium in your blood as well. And that could then cause issues where like more water is secreted into your digestive tract. There's like a lot of different mechanisms going on here, Ryder. So you're right in that assumption, I would assume, for sure. I've had this before, but not the night before sort of festivities, but I've had this before where I've taken in too much sodium on accident in the middle of a ride, and I've had the same issues with it. So like, I know we've said on the podcast, like, take it in, don't worry, you can sweat it out. But we've always been talking within like reasonable amounts, like a lot of people we've talked about getting sweat tests where you might get 750 milligrams. And some people have been tested upwards of 2,000 milligrams that they sweat out an hour that I've seen. I don't know if anybody's been tested.
3,500 an hour.
Oh my gosh.
It's massive.
That's like a problem because like, how do you even take that in? Right? Like
it was a challenge.
What did that athlete have to do?
Yeah. Well, and what was interesting was he wasn't even really having cramping issues. He just was never quite feeling real great, like during and after his training. And so we're like, okay, well, we gotta rule electrolytes out, and it came back so high. So quite a bit of preloading going on, and then just trying to find fuel product that would give them a really high dose. I think we were looking at like Precision Hydration probably has some of the highest sodium. Yeah, they've got a 1,500 milligram tablet. And just looking at how we can fill that gap as best as possible to get them through.
Yeah, Ryder too. I'm looking at Domino's, and their wings are 14-piece wings, depending on the sauce, could be like almost 5,000 milligrams of sodium right there with just 14 wings, which I think is, as a college person, pretty, like, you
14
totally
wings
eat
is
that.
easy.
Yeah, 40 wings is could be almost 14,000 milligrams of sodium, and then the pizza.
Okay, well, 40. Well, come on, 40.
Anything's
but still.
possible, Ivy.
Yeah.
And then Domino's itself, like a cheese pizza, like a small one, was something like, I don't know, 2,500 around there, like plus the 1,500, plus the next day you're drinking salt water as you start the race. Yeah, and then you're dehydrated, like your whole body's messed up from the drinking, the hydration, and you're just throwing the salt in, like as John said, and it's trying to too much at once.
And it's
gotta
a
eat
really
flat out.
high fat meal the night before. And think of like a really high fat meal. That's like
that too.
lubricant on your guts right there. So
It's a, but what if we were to design a way to suck at your race as much as possible? I think it would be this,
Sorry, Ryder.
just roasting them.
right? Just like fireball and wings, and then drink salt water. I hope he hears this in jest,
I mean-
but yeah, don't. If you need to party, do it for the day afterwards.
I mean, classic
Yeah.
college freshman right there. I mean, you nailed it, Ryder, right there.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. What's college freshman? What's the drinking age? Ryder. I'm contacting you.
Ryder's-
FBI. You're busted, buddy.
He's in Europe, I'm sure. Yeah. This brings up, let's end on the social component of this, because collegiate cycling, like the night before, is probably going to, so if Ryder's hearing this, and if you're hearing this outside of Ryder, or if you are a Ryder, and you find yourself in this sort of environment, like it's complicated because the night before you want to hang out with your friends and do all that stuff. I promise you though, you can still hang out. You can still do all those things, but then you can still make the sort of choices that can elevate your performance and make it so that you aren't making a mid-race wood stop for diarrhea. So
Yeah.
you can still have fun. You can still be present. You can still support all your friends. You can engage in that camaraderie. You totally can. And you can still do those things separately. I think built out of like social anxiety, we build up this like, I need to do everything that everybody is doing. Like I need to be all in into this experience in order to be a part of it and to be accepted. That's like an internal dialogue. I think that a lot happens. But Ryder, you sound, just from reading this, you sound like a really fun guy. And you sound like an awesome person to hang out with. I guarantee you that all your friends will want to hang out with you just the same, even if you're not hitting fireball or doing that sort
Yeah.
of stuff.
Take care of yourself,
There's
and then
like-
you can smoke their butts in the race the next day.
It's like
So
a
it's
combination too of like the more I do, the more like party and cool I am by, the amount of Dominoes, the amount of fireball and stuff like that. And if you do choose to drink and still have some of the fun, you don't need to do it to an excess amount. And I did that in college too, after I was 21, of course.
Yeah, when we were talking earlier about, folks that will make you feel weird about not drinking or put pressure on you, this is the demographic that I'm thinking of, unfortunately, is like younger college athletes, like me playing college volleyball and then also doing a little bit of collegiate cycling. Like, yeah, younger people that don't maybe have the emotional cognizance to be like, hey, someone's like telling me that they want to do a good job in the race tomorrow and so they're not going to drink. Yeah, I should just listen to them and support them. Like, unfortunately, that doesn't happen very often with younger folks, so it can be hard. Like, this is the setting that I was thinking of when you're trying to not drink and you get pressured. Like, it seems like no one now would do anything like that, but it totally happens. So it might be hard for Ryder. I could get it.
Yeah. At the very least, Ryder, you have our support. You're doing just fine. And it doesn't make you a square, man. You can still have an absolute blast and be a ton of fun to be with and everything.
Yeah, and like Alex said, just smoke them. And they'll be like, what?
But don't gloat.
Yeah.
Just have fun with them. Yeah. Be the friend. The way that this podcast works is you send questions to trainerroad.com/podcast. If you haven't done that recently, if you haven't done that at all, you totally should do it. Send whatever training questions you have. And really, the main way this works is because TrainerRoad still exists and continues to grow. And it's thanks to people like you that are listening to this, that share it with your friends and sign up for TrainerRoad. Keep doing that. Please keep doing that. Rate this podcast on Spotify and go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. We'll talk to you all soon. Thanks a bunch, Alex, for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.